If someone says you're aggressive, yes, damn straight I am. When it comes to my company, my people, yes, I'm very aggressive. And I'm very proud of the fact that I'm aggressive. I've cried at work and my teams know that I've cried at work, and it's okay. We're human beings too. This whole masculine culture is getting talked about in the West. I'd say East, this is our time to talk about how a more feminine, emotional, human culture can create and develop success. Asia should absolutely own that.
Women think if I put out too much about myself, I am boasting, or I'll be looked at as being too aggressive. Is it a gender thing, or is it more Asian thing? Welcome to another episode of Rewrite the Rules. Today, we have a very interesting guest. Her name is Amrita Randhawa, CEO of Publicis Groupe, Singapore and Southeast Asia. 25 years in advertising, and there's so many questions I want to ask her. Welcome, Amrita, to this episode.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, advertising. The first thing when I think of advertising, I think of brands and leaders, and especially women leaders. How can women leaders brand themselves more? That's one. But also, why are women leaders reluctant in putting their brand out there? Firstly, what does a brand mean? And what is personal brand?
So you've asked a question that I've been searching for the answer for my entire 25 years. What is a brand, right? Because you have the textbook definition, but I think the closest that I get to is a brand is how you feel, right? What are those characteristics, whether it's packaging, product, how it appears, how it communicates, that make you feel something, that evoke something inside you. And I think that's true of people also. You get a vibe from someone. And that's the personal brand. And I think the more authentic a brand is, the more real it is, the more true to itself it is, the more powerful it is. And that's true for, I think, people and women leaders as well. The more authentic and true to yourself you are, and without pretenses, because you can't be what you're not. So for me, a brand is really that feeling that you get, whether it's a person or something that you buy or whatever. Otherwise, how would you explain the entire business of luxury?
Yes, that's so true. What is then personal brand mean? From a personal branding perspective, what are your thoughts? Like, how do people go about creating a personal brand?
I don't think I ever intentionally, thought about creating a personal brand. It happened kind of organically, and I would say that if I was to say the three words that I think are my personal brand, it would be warm, it would be loud, and it would be highly competitive. But there's a really interesting exercise you can do to discover your personal brand. And
tell us that.
So there's a gentleman called Rishad Tobaccowala who is a consultant for Publicis Groupe, and he does this fantastic blog every Sunday. He says, think about 3 words. 3 words. So your job is to come up with 9 words. First 3 words is, what are the 3 words that are true to your voice? Yeah. What is your voice? What are the things you're passionate about, the things you want to talk about, the things that make a difference to you? The second is 3 words about your niche, right? What are you the master of when it comes to knowledge? And then what are the 3 words when it's your story? Once you have the 9 words, you should try and trim it down to 3, 1 from each, and you'll kind of come up with your personal brand. But I thought it was quite an interesting exercise.
Yeah. So 2 questions. Is there also an element of how people perceive you? Do people consider that when they're thinking of the brand? Should they consider that? And then the second part is, how are you perceived today? Because people say that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. How does one get to know what people are thinking about them?
Yeah. So I have a slightly contrarian point of view.
No, go ahead.
I have a slightly contrarian point of view to that. Because I think people will say what they want to say based on not just what your intention is, but the circumstances they meet you in, you know, what you're able to do at any particular time or not able to do at a particular time for them. So there are many kind of extraneous factors that come into what people take. But I think when you think about your personal brand, you have to think with intention a little bit, right? what is the feeling I want to leave you with today, right? What's that feeling? So in my intent for a personal brand, I've got to be a bit purist. Yeah. Essentially, I think a personal brand has to be about a reflection about yourself. What do you want to leave behind?
So my second question, why are women leaders in general, reluctant to consciously or intentionally work on brand, on their personal brand? I get a lot of questions saying, why is it important? My work is there. Why do I need to build a brand? And even if they agree to that, there's a little bit of that hesitation, reluctance. No, I don't want to be seen being this person who's blowing their own trumpet. What's your view on why are women a little reluctant or hesitant?
I would hate to generalize.
No, sure.
But I've heard a few different things from women that I mentor, right? One is it's seen, and maybe there's a bit of Asian culture there as well, certainly. Maybe we're all a little, do you want to be prideful, boastful? That's really not us. And I think that's true certainly of a lot of the women that I mentored, where they're like, oh, won't I just I'll come off like a bit of an ass, won't I?
Yeah.
If I just, go around every day on LinkedIn talking about here's what I did, right? So one is a little element of that. Two is there's a real belief that people are doing things that aren't worth talking about, right? And funnily enough, a gentleman who I'm mentoring in the UK who's never posted on LinkedIn once, who I'm trying to get across the line and saying, mate, you gotta do it, right? Nothing I'm doing is worthy of posting. So we've already judged ourselves quite intensely and said nothing that we're doing is worthy of posting. And then I would say that there's a third camp, which is women who have young kids, who are doing a big job, where I don't have the time. That's the only valid reason, I think. I think that's the only valid reason is the third one. The first two, no, it's not boastful at all. You're letting people know what you do. And that is a necessary thing in today's world. As there's complexity in the workplace, roles aren't as easily well defined as before. You also want to put out there what is your achievement at work. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not one of those people who's posting, every single day saying, today I woke up in the morning, drank a cup of coffee, aren't I amazing? Right? As long as you're not that. And we don't need to judge whether the work that we're doing is good or important or purposeful or worthy of sharing. If you think it's important work, it's occupying your day, you feel achievement from it, of course it's worthy to talk about.
Yeah. True. If I were to ask you, are there 2 or 3 things that you would say to a person, to an emerging leader, saying, do these 3 things to start building a brand, a personal brand? What would those 3 steps be?
I would actually really boil it down to one. What are you passionate about? And I'll bring that to life maybe with what I do, right? Like I said, part of my brand was I'm highly competitive, right? So every time one of my teams wins a piece of new business, wins an award, wins something, that is something I'm absolutely going to talk about, that we're ahead of, we're winning, we're growing. This very much feeds my personal brand also, and is really important to the second part, which is warmth and people feeling like I genuinely care about them. So for me, it's a platform for people. So what are you passionate about? What is that thing that brings you to work, that makes you want to do what you do? Find that and be really pure in that. I love building teams. That is my core DNA. My core DNA, it's the first line of my CV, is I love building a team. And I love it when a team works well together. So anything that involves showcasing how teams come together, how teams work well, how we win with a great team, that is 100% part of what I talk about, what I post about, how I build my brand. It is that. So find that thing that really is your core passion and make sure that you're 100% clear on it.
So passion, right? Like that's passion. How you find out. Right?
Because the rest of it, like you can say, oh, I want to look at my industry and think about what's important. And maybe everybody's talking about AI right now, so let me start talking about AI. It's never going to be authentic. But if it's genuinely something you're passionate about, and it might not be the thing that you're organization or industry is talking about. But if you're passionate about it, it'll also come far more naturally to you.
That's true. So is there a step 2 after they found their passion?
After you found that passion, other people need to know your passion, so get on with it. As with 99% of things in life, get it done.
Get it done, yeah. Do you think, Amrita, is it easier now to build your brand because of, platforms, let's say like LinkedIn, and I'm saying LinkedIn because mainly professionals mainly use LinkedIn, or even, big organizations have these internal websites and all of that, right? Do you think digital makes it easy for you?
No, it's definitely made it far more easier. But I think the people who've done great jobs building their brands is when you go beyond the digital realm and you put your hand up, which might be the third step if you'd like one. I will say yes to anything where it is talking about building teams. How do you build high functioning teams? How do you get them to work together? How do you solve for problems together? Anything like that, I put my hand up for and say, yes, I want to be a part, 2, talk about, 3, make sure I take learnings and deliver them back. And be brave enough to go beyond digital, because it's also a bit of a wheel, right?
That's
you
right.
can craft the perfect post and you can make sure that it's hit all the right hashtags and whatnot. But I still don't know whether that's you.
That's correct. Okay, so great. So we've got these 3 steps. Find your passion.
We've evolved.
Yeah, find your passion. Start with digital, because that's an easy space to start. Start putting, stuff out there. And the third is go beyond digital. Great. I want to make a switch. You've spent all these 25 years in the region, in Asia.
Yes.
15 years in China, in India, and of course, even in Singapore now. Has that been intentional?
It was absolutely not intentional. I grew up in a fairly middle-class Indian household, and the aspiration was always go to the USA, go to UK, go to Europe, That's what success meant. And my mother, when I first told my mom that I was becoming CEO of Mindshare in China and we were going to move there, my mom started crying.
Why?
Yeah, she started crying for 2 reasons. She's like, I'm not sure China CEO is a good job. Right? That was her first reaction. Then, of course, the second reaction was you're moving further away from me. So there was never an intention. But in the process of doing so, I think it was the best possible thing that happened to me. I went to China at a point in time where it was really China's coming out party. Between 2005 and 2009, for the first time, the Olympics were happening. China was on the world stage. It was double-digit GDP growth. I then moved into Singapore at a point in time when the Lehman Brothers crisis hit and kind of everybody switched view from the US onto other parts of the world. And I think some of the nuanced areas of Asia finally took a global stage. I've had opportunities along the way to kind of move to a US role or a UK role. And I think I lost out on a global CEO role as well because I didn't have US experience. But I have zero regrets because this is the region. This is where I am the expert of, and this is where my career has been.
And very interesting. And one of the things I have been talking in the book Rewrite the Rules, we wrote about this, and the focus has been so narrow on women leaders in Asia, because one of the things I have found working with women leaders now almost for 10 years in the region is that lots of books, articles, everything that we read, they have great frameworks, but all the examples are Western, right? And somehow we don't have too much material focusing on women leaders and in Asia. But I also know, and when you were talking about Asia being the region right now, it's actually a good time for all of us, right? It's a good time for leaders in general being in Asia and for women leaders, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Amrita, women leaders in Asia, how can they leverage the fact that they know enough about the region, they've grown here, they understand the business, how can they leverage that more?
Yeah. First and foremost, what a shame, no?
It is.
That's not the case. It was quite funny. I was on a flight yesterday, day before yesterday, going to Vietnam. And the CEO of Unilever Vietnam, the country head, who's a woman, was on the flight. The regional CEO of Abbott, who's a woman, was on the flight. I was on the flight. There was the head of marketing for PepsiCo International, who is a woman, who was on the flight. I think that there is a lot for women leaders from this region to own about the fact that, one, we do have a lot of women who are in senior positions. Obviously, can be more.
Sure.
Task never done. But we're doing probably, I think, two things that we can do better, right? One, tell the story of the region.
Yeah.
Right? Tell the story of the region, tell the nuance of the region in a really simplified and compelling way. People tend to paint Asia in broad brushstrokes, right? I have 1.4 billion people here. I have 1.1 billion people here. I have 200 and odd million people in Indonesia. So it's always the numbers game, right? But there's so much more to this region than just pure play population. There's the texture of how business gets done, and how business gets done in a China versus in India versus Southeast Asia is very, very different, right? There is the texture of opportunity as well. We see massive numbers of family businesses, for example, that are in Southeast Asia, and no one's telling the story of them or their needs. No one's telling the story of the fact that geopolitical forces are creating entirely new segments within this region. If I look at myself, I'm an Indian citizen. I live and work in Singapore. I have a house in Portugal, right? I am what someone would call a neo-nomad. So we're not telling the textured nuance of this region. So how to simplify the storytelling of this region, this is the thing that I obsess about in my job all day long, and make it clear to people that what opportunity looks like. Because when we paint it in broad brushstrokes, everybody assumes that I'm going to come to China and sell a billion products. Well, no, not really. But what you will find is maybe a segment of 100 million that could be highly, highly lucrative and a growth segment moving forward. So you've got to get better at telling that story. Right? And I do believe that women are very good at storytelling. Right? So I think women leaders need to maybe think about how can we tell the stories of the region in much more humane, understanding, emotional ways that really capture and bring to life the opportunity of this region.
Right.
That's, I think, one thing that we can do a lot more of.
Yeah. And you got me thinking about a couple of things as you were talking. One of them was that sometimes language, right? Not really a barrier, but sometimes maybe that's holding them back, right? Because in the region, English, which is typically the business language, is not the first language for many of us, including us from India, right? So that is one which comes out a lot whenever I'm talking to women leaders. In fact, we address that in the book also. The other thing is people typically think that Asia is more patriarchal, and in some cases it is. But also there are so many advantages. Childcare in Asia, that's much affordable. We have ecosystems of our family. Support system and family. That's a norm, right? That's not an exception. That's a norm, right? So there is all of that support for women leaders, which our counterparts in the West probably don't have. How do we probably encourage women leaders to leverage all of these more, rather than getting bogged down by the language or by the cultural thing or by this whole aspiration of everything Western? And I know I'm sounding like a little bit like an old person thing, but how do we shift that narrative or encourage women leaders more to own the story, as you were saying?
It's such an interesting thing because I think that the language thing is actually a real strength. I'm sitting in this room, we're talking about maybe, let's say, Indonesia, and 70% of the people presenting to me are either Indian or Western or whatever. We're the Indonesians. And they don't care about the language. They genuinely don't care about the language. They want to hear the authenticity of the local person's point of view and that person's life experience and how that interacts with their brand. So I think it's such an advantage.
Exactly.
No one cares about the perfection of the sentiment expressed. What they're looking for, the hardest thing to find today, is a true human insight around behavior, consumers, what's happening in markets. That real, raw, authentic consumer insight is so hard to find. We can find hundreds of polished people giving generic presentations in perfect English. We will not have the world's most perfect English presenter, but someone who's real, who's raw, who's authentic, who speaks who speaks one sentence of truth about consumer experience and can dramatically change the course of where a meeting is going and where a brand is going.
Yeah.
So it's such an advantage. I absolutely don't see it as a weakness. And then with respect to kind of the second part of leveraging the resources, I would say even more so here, because we have wider networks beyond even core family, right?
Correct.
Your nuclear family, your extended family, but even friends,
Yes.
aunts, uncles. I mean, I say this all the time about my daughter. I brought her up, but there's a group of 5 women who brought her up as well, who I'm not related to at all. There's, a group of 4 guys who have as much of a role in her life as I do. And when I travel, like a couple of weeks ago, I was in India to see my mom. She was here. She considers it absolutely her right to message them on WhatsApp and say, right, I'm missing mom, come take me out to dinner.
Yeah.
Right? We get shy about asking.
Yeah.
I think, again, it's a little bit of the Asianness in us. We don't want to impose. We don't want to make it a problem for someone else. But equally, would we not do it for anybody else around us?
Right.
Of course we would.
Yeah. I think
course
it's
we do.
asking.
It's asking. We get shy about.
Yeah.
Shy about it. But I feel that in most Asian cultures, at least, the fact that you are asked is a sign of trust, is a sign of importance. So actually you're giving that person face, importance, trust when you ask them.
Yeah.
So do it.
Correct. I often say, when people say, oh, if I ask this person, am I troubling them? I jokingly say that you're depriving the other person of the joy.
Of the opportunity and the joy. And I do it for my friends as well, right?
Yeah. So. That's true. That's true. We know Asia is the growth engine right now of the world, literally. And, if you look at the population, women are 50% of the population. They are going to drive that growth. And it's important for women leaders or anybody who's working in the spaces to own that space and say that we are bringing all of this to the table and leverage that and not feel restricted or not feel any less and things like that, right? Back to conversation about branding, okay? Because it just came to my mind. Is this a Asian thing that women think if I put out too much about myself, I am boasting, or I'll be looked at as like being too aggressive or too thing? Or do you think it's general? Is it a gender thing or is it more Asian thing?
I think it's pretty true across the world.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty true across the world. I do think there is a little element of gender in there around. You generally see it a little less from women who are, if I post anything, do I just come off as pushy?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there's a lot of those words which are words I don't like so much, pushy, aggressive. I'm happy to be called aggressive.
Yeah.
Just for clarity.
Yeah.
I'm totally okay with it. If someone says you're aggressive, yes, damn straight I am. When it comes to my company, my people, my team, yes, I'm very aggressive. And I'm very proud of the fact that I'm aggressive. But there is a ascription, if you like, to words being used in the context of you that become a negative. And I think we have to change that a little bit, which will only happen if women leaders set the example to other women coming up that it's okay. I have 0 issues with somebody saying you're bossy.
Right.
Yes, I'd rather be in charge. Damn straight.
Yeah. I think owning it is really important, like whatever that is. Amrita, tell me, 25 years and going of this amazing career, what have been some of your key moments of some highlights, but also some lowlights?
It's interesting that you ask for highlights and lowlights because I feel like my life is a bit of a roller coaster. I remember when I got asked to be the CEO for Mindshare in China by my 2 male bosses. My first answer to them was, have you gone mad? Yeah, I had no market experience of running a market. I was 34 at the time. It was 50% of our region, China as a market. I thought they'd lost the plot. But I think that decision to go to China as CEO, and I debated it a lot in my mind. And I say that with a little bit of dishonesty, because in my mind, when they asked, my mental immediate answer was yes.
Yes.
Right? But then my
You
5
second
seconds
guess.
later, the thought process was, oh no, my daughter's only 1.5 years old. This is a big job. I don't know how to do it. There's not a huge track record of success for people who've come before me in this job. And I will forever be grateful to both my mother and my husband, because they did say at that point in time, if you don't take it, you're absolutely going to hate yourself. Right? So that was a real high for me, because I didn't think I was qualified for the job. I genuinely don't think I was qualified. So that was one definite high in my life, because I think it changed my career. Lows, I put my hand up, as is my policy in life, to put my hand up for everything for a global CEO position. And after a very short interview and like a day of waiting, it was like, no, it's not you. Man, was I gutted. But equally, it turned out to be the best goddamn decision, because I'd always assumed that global CEO job would be my next job.
Yeah.
But it actually forced me to then say, what do I want to do? And the job that I went into after that is absolutely what I wanted to do. And it absolutely leveraged what my strengths were. And it absolutely made me not give up any of my non-negotiables. So it's a bit like roller coastery, big high. Oh shit, I can't do it. Okay, but I want to do it. Oh shit, I want to put my hand up for this. Okay, I didn't get it, but actually that gives me an opportunity. So it's a bit like that.
Yeah, no, it's
a bit
great.
Like that.
Firstly, thank you for your honesty and sharing it so openly, because again, it takes a lot of humility, a lot of confidence to talk about that, right? The other thing I wanted to ask about you when taking decisions, right? Do you think, from your perspective, and then again, generalizing, I say that all the time, but even then I'll ask, is there a difference in the way men make decisions versus women make decisions?
I have to say that in my observation, no.
No, okay.
Yeah, in my observation, absolutely not. I've seen, if you were to stick to the cliches of, operating from your gut and going based on feeling versus kind of rationality, I've seen both kinds of decision-making styles in men and women. I think life experience has a lot to do with how people take decisions.
I love that.
It's far less gender, it's far more life experience. I think it's also where you are at a particular point in time in your life. You can be a very confident decision maker sometimes, but then your personal life may be going through absolute disaster.
Yeah.
So I think life experience and life situation is a far bigger factor on how you make decisions than anything else.
Nice. If you were to think back, what would you tell your younger self?
What would I tell my younger self? You don't have to prove yourself quite so much. I don't think you have to put yourself under that much pressure to prove yourself. And that comes with time and the confidence of knowing that I can do things and I do add value. It's interesting. If you had asked me in my previous job, how much of this success is you, Amrita? I'd say, well, it's me, but it's also the company, right? Because I'd worked there for 17 years and it used to always be a bit of a debate in my mind. How much of me succeeding is because I know this organization and I know everybody and I know how to get work done, and how much of that is because I am making the decisions that I'm making. In this job, I don't doubt that at all. That it is a large factor is me, right? But I think early on, we put ourselves under a lot of pressure to prove ourselves in the job versus knowing that doing the job and doing it well, people who are going to see that value in you. You don't have to put yourself under that pressure and burden of trying to prove yourself.
Yeah. You mentioned that you and also from where you are right now as a CEO, you would be seeing so many emerging women leaders. And as you said, your company has 65% women leaders. That's amazing. What are some of the challenges, or what are some of the questions you get when you speak with them? What are some of the common top 2 or 3 questions that you get?
You'd be surprised that a singular recurring question is, why do you think of me? it's the question I asked also, but why me?
When you pick them up for a promotion or something.
For a promotion is, why me? Why do you think I can do this? It's almost a certain level of disbelief, almost like help explain to me the reasons for why you're picking me versus I know why you're picking me. I know what my value is. It's ridiculous. I would say I can tell you in roughly 80% of the conversations that I've had with women leaders who I'm picking up to do, why'd you think of me? A certain level of shock almost. I don't get asked that a lot in other cases.
Interesting. What are some of the challenges they talk about?
I think for a lot of women, balancing home, kids especially, is a big challenge. Because the assumption is that when you take on a leadership role, you somehow have to give up being a mother. Or even when they're not moms, they have very close relationships with other kids in their lives, whether it be nieces or nephews. The single biggest challenge is kids. How do I be present for them, be there for them? How do I not take the tension home? How do I not take the stress home? How do I make sure I'm there for the pivotal moments of their life and don't miss those pivotal moments trying to chase the important moments in my life?
So then what's your answer? How do you manage that?
I manage that actually by using my mom's advice, which is the advice that she gave me when I both took on the China role, and I think when my first day going back to work after I had my daughter, because I was like very all over the place thinking about, am I doing the right thing, not the right thing? And she kind of said, so the example you want to set for your daughter is that when she grows up, she cannot make the confident decision of having a life for herself, chasing her career goals, but also having kids. Cool, I understand that. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying, right? But she's like, that's exactly what you're saying to me, is that you want her to believe that it's going to be a tough choice, right? She said, you can take it as that, or you can take it as the point that you're going to do your damnedest to set the best possible example that you can live a full, rich career, personal interest, whatever the hell you want life, and you can also have kids. And the way I do it is, I hate work-life balance, home-work balance. I think it's such a bullshit term, pardon my language. But it is. It's a terrible term, and it's a terrible expectation we have set people up for. There is no balance. Balance by its very definition is transient and teetering and hard to achieve. I do a lot of work-life integration.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll do a lot of work-life integration. Everybody at work knows my daughter's name, knows what grade she is in, knows her interests, because I talk loudly, intensely, multiple times a day about her, right? Because so that when those moments come that, yes, I'm not going to go to Cannes this year because it's Anjali's first semi-formal dance and I want to be there for that experience, right? It's not a thing that's even debated, discussed. But same thing with Anjali. I tell her everything about my work. She's the person who bought me a packet of M&Ms and left them on my bed when we were the night before a very big pitch where I was very worried that whether we would win or not win. And she wrote me the sweet note saying, don't worry, there'll be idiots if they don't appoint you. You've given all of your heart to this pitch, this, that, the third. But she also knows what are the big events in Mama's life and what are the big things she's working to achieve.
Yeah, I love this example. So beautifully said. The term integration. And I think more and more we should talk about that instead of trying to, really get this word out of work-life balance, because there is no balance. Like, as you said, the term balance itself is very unsettling, right? In your mind, it sends this thing where you're trying to
perfection as the vibe,
or
if you like.
Or you're trying to like tiptoe on something and maintaining the balance. Like, it's somehow very unsettling. So I love the integration. If you were to pick one thing that's been a common thread through your career, what's that been?
Not thinking too much. Does that? It might sound counterintuitive,
but that's
not
perfect.
thinking too much. I have generally avoided splitting hairs about, is this really the best possible move that I can make? Is this the right job for me? If somebody calls me up for a job interview, I say yes, I'll have a listen. No problem at all. Intuitively, I know what I want to do, right? It'll feel right or it won't feel right in the moment. But I don't think too much about it. I don't get too scientific with pros and cons lists and what you like about anything in my career. When the opportunity comes, you will know it is right, and your first instinct will likely be the right instinct.
If I were to look back at my career and my life, I'm pretty much same. Some of my biggest decisions of life, including getting married, have just been like that, not thinking through too much. Quitting my corporate life after 20 years, again, people said you have a plan B, plan C. I'm like, nothing. As I look back in my life, have just been not thinking through a lot, because I knew if I had thought through a lot of any of them, they wouldn't have happened probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can totally resonate with that. Amrita, tell me something. We are Rewrite the Rules, where the podcast is all about Rewrite the Rules. What is one rule that you have rewritten?
I think the one rule that I've rewritten is that you can cry very frequently at work and still be successful. And not be seen as weak or emotional or lacking the chops for a leadership role. I think if you ask any one of my teams in any stage of my career, I have cried at work.
Mic drop moment. Again, because a lot of women leaders, we are high on emotion, and that's genetic, right? Like there's no two ways about it.
Biology is your biology.
Exactly. But there is so much of stigma attached to, women show too much emotions at work, or we shouldn't be emotional at work, or we are tagged as being very emotional. But I think hearing this is hopefully really going to shift a lot of things for a lot of people.
My bosses know that I've cried at work, and my teams know that I've cried at work, and it's okay. We're human beings too, huh?
Absolutely. Is there anything that we haven't talked that you would love to talk about?
The way the world is today, I think there is a real role for a more human, emotionally connected voice, which naturally women do have, I think, to shape our future, to shape decisions, to I know that this whole masculine culture and, all of that is getting talked about in the West. I'd say East, this is our time to talk about how a more feminine, emotional, human culture can create and develop success in a really meaningful way. Good for business, good for society, good for people. I would say Asia should absolutely own that.
Yeah. Perfect. We actually, as Rewrite the Rules podcast, we are kind of really privileged to playing a role in this, because our whole existence is about amplifying voices of women leaders in Asia, and we've been very intentional about it to get leaders like yourself to come and talk about their journey, so that it can not only inspire but also what I call create relatable role models for emerging women leaders in the region. So thank you for sharing your story. As always, it's amazing to speak with you, and thanks for sharing all that wisdom.
Thank you for having me again.